Hello there, Jamie.
Hello.
Dr.
My
J.
head's like Dr. J. Martini the third.
I love that.
Yeah,
You should change your name to that.
I know. I kind of want to,
Yeah.
but I mean, it makes it just makes sense. It makes sense. It checks
So
out.
it checks out.
Mm,
Martini the third, especially.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jamie Montez, and I'm a scientist.
And I'm Rebecca Knox, and I'm an actress and filmmaker. And we are
Slice
Me.
nice.
So today we have a really interesting guest. Would you
Yeah.
like to talk about them?
Yes. So our guest today is one of my friends. And she is an ancient astrologer. She also is my personal therapist, but she is an ancient astrologer. She also does tarot readings, and she is an artist as well. She is going to be explaining to everyone the difference between the many different types of astrology and what everyone knows is our rising, our sun, and our moon, and the time of when you were born and what all that kind of means and how you can map everything out.
Actually, you know what? Why don't you tell us what are your sun, moon, and rising?
Okay, I always forget, but why would I forget? Because I live by it. So okay, so my rising or my ascending is Aquarius. My moon is, oh no, it happened again.
I think it's
Okay.
Sagittarius.
Is it? I have it.
I
Hold
don't know.
on.
I don't remember.
I
I
know my
can't believe you
sun.
don't remember, Jamie.
Sue me. Sun, Aries. My moon is Virgo.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And your ascending is Aquarius.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My
Interesting
moon
combo.
is Virgo. Okay.
Are you trying to be like Megan Fox?
Yeah. So
You have a
funny. Go ahead.
stellium of planets in your fifth house.
In your fifth house.
I don't know if that's real, but anyway.
Okay.
Um,
What's yours?
I am a Taurus sun, Scorpio moon, and my rising or ascending is
Mm-hmm.
Cancer.
Okay.
So Mara, your friend's name is Mara. And so she is going to explain what these different signs mean in Hellenistic astrology for each chart, and like what the rising sign represents and what role the sun sign plays. And then if your chart is sun or moon. Also, honestly, if you are interested, anyone who's listening, you should totally book a session with her. She's really on point. She's going to talk about tarot. Yeah, she's very on point. She's very in tune. It's really interesting stuff. I love it. We love
Oh,
it.
she's like okay, so little backstory. So I'm unhinged naturally. And so
You're
anything
going
that
to say
happens,
that every episode, just
I
so
know
everyone
that's
remembers.
so anything that happens, I'm like, oh God, I gotta like instead of like journaling, which I do sometimes, but like instead of doing things like that, I guess that a normal, well, I guess is that whatever. I am like, I'm gonna call Mara. I need some answers. I need facts. And this is what she does. She was like, she breaks it down and she is like, okay, so this is what's happening. This is correct because you
This is
should be
the
feeling this.
phase
This
of
is the
life you're
phase.
in.
And then she'll throw some cards down and it's just like bada bing, bada boom. Everything checks out.
I
And then I
mean,
can kind of go back to normal and just be like, all
I
right.
do have a hard time though with the word facts when relating to this stuff, because I feel like facts are so tangible, where this is kind of more like in the ether, like where it's like you're kind of trusting in an unknown sense and feeling and kind of magic, right?
It is magic. It's facts to me
Yeah,
though.
facts to you. And as long as they're facts to you, I mean, I always take everything with a grain of salt, and I do get
Yeah.
like readings done and all of that. But when they do end up proving themselves to be on point, and things do come to fruition, I always am like, What does it mean?
What
I
does it
know
mean?
nothing.
I don't know anything either, but I do know that, like, okay, so the first time she did my chart and then kind of broke everything down to me. By the way, like looking at your chart, your natal chart and all that stuff is like a riddle. I don't know if anyone's ever seen it. It's like a wheel and the wheel of fortune essentially. And so it breaks down everything for you. And so she's breaking it down for me and I'm like, everything is just beep bop bop boop bop bop. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, okay, cool. Then after that, she did a deck of cards and just like for the whole like year, just a general reading, and everything kind of like collided together. I will tell you the things that she said to me that were in the present and in the future along with the past, everything, I'm not kidding, and I always talk about this, it matched up. And so that was, I'm like, I'm sold. I am sold. And then from that point on, anytime I was kind of like having like weird transition emotionally, I would ask her, I'm like, what's happening? And she kind of breaks it down. Why do I trust that? I don't know why I trust it. It's like, would I trust a stranger with my valuable things or like walking in a dark alleyway? No, but for some reason, like
Yeah.
I trust this and I'm like, yep, everything checks out. Like I have no
Well,
questions for the most part.
I think that's like the working of the universe though, like you have faith
Yeah.
in something and manifestation and things, you just have to have trust in your path. You have to. Otherwise, I mean, I know I'd just crumble if I believed all the bullshit I told myself that was like negative. God, I'd be
Yeah.
lost. It's going to be really cool to talk to her. And
It's gonna be
seriously, you
fun.
guys, you should book with her because
She's
it's
amazing. She
really
really
insightful.
is.
I don't want to share anything about my reading I had with her because it's still really early in the year. And she said very specific things that I'm like, okay, don't want to talk about them. They're not important. But I mean, they
They
are,
are
but not.
important, but you just want them for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I want them for myself. But I am very curious to see like at the end of the year, like how things do play out. But anyway, Jamie, on that note,
Yes.
would you like to share? Should we have our fact of the day?
Yeah. So my fun fact is us as human beings actually can swallow or ingest razor blades, and our stomach acid is strong enough to dissolve it within like 2 hours. That's how strong your stomach acid is. Yeah, it's like super acidic, right?
So it can break down a razor blade, but it
Mhm.
can't break, like it doesn't break down your esophagus when you're puking up bile.
Oh, it actually does break down your esophagus. So you know when you puke and you have like you feel like you got like a cat scratch, like
It's
like
because
a
it tore.
it's because it's burnt. You have like actual like acid burn. So yeah, we don't puke
Acid
bile or like, you know what I'm saying? We're not puking that up
all the
all
time.
ever. We're not hardly ever doing that. So yeah, that's at least I'm not.
I'm
I
not
don't know.
either.
But yeah, isn't that crazy?
Um, that is such a goth slash emo. I don't know if that's even a good thing to tell the public because I feel like that's a dangerous thing to tell people.
Obviously, how would you even like, you wouldn't be able to like swallow it, but it's just,
I mean, it would fucking hurt, right? What if it cuts? I don't know. Anyway, that's crazy.
what's your fact? What's your fact?
A giant black hole hurls through space at 5 million miles per hour. That's it.
Cool.
I just thought it's cool because I'm obsessed with black holes right now. And
Yeah.
NASA is going to like they're planning to blast off a satellite into space, into a black hole to see if it's possible to record the Big Bang, because there's a theory that it's how you can like time travel, ripple through time and space. And obviously time does not exist. So I don't know. I think that's cool. I really love that NASA is really just getting experimental up in this bitch and just throwing shit at a wall and seeing what sticks. You know what I mean? Like, let's just put a fucking satellite into a black hole and see if we can record the Big Bang. What? How does
Yeah.
that work? Why does anyone believe that? I don't know. But you know what? I just want to say one last thing. Before we bring our guest on, I just want to
Mhm.
share that I bought a really cool t-shirt today. And I guess it's a band. I didn't know that. I just bought it.
You didn't know it was a band?
No. I literally got it because I like what it says. My t-shirt says alien sex fiend. And I just think it's badass. And I was
It
like,
is badass.
yeah,
I thought
alien
you knew that was
sex
a
fiend.
band.
No, what do they sound like?
I don't know. They sound okay.
Okay, I'm gonna look it up after because I am gonna be rocking this all the time. I just thought it would be cool to like rock a t-shirt that says alien sex fiend. Anyway.
Okay, moving forward, please. So we are gonna introduce our guest and see how that goes.
Knock knock. Who's there? Welcome, Mara. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about your background in astrology.
So I've been practicing modern astrology probably since 2008, 2009. I switched over to Hellenistic astrology probably 2019, right before the pandemic, with the kind of like resurgence and availability of more professional, like more access to professional astrology online. Hellenistic or ancient astrology is a classical form of astrology that differs from other schools like evolutionary or psychological, um, Vedic, horary, electional. There's many different schools and types of astrology that people practice, but I really have been interested in practicing the classical ancient techniques that you get from Hellenistic astrology because they combine the best of two things. One, the kind of, the agency of free will, and the other, which is the fate and fortune, which is sort of beyond our control. So there's a real combination there that I've found in ancient astrology using those techniques that I have not been able to find in modern astrology. So that's kind of where I'm coming from in terms of it. I really more of like, it's been self-study for me. I don't have formal training, but I have been practicing and studying it for the last few years.
I do have a question for you though, right off the bat. What is the difference between Hellenistic astrology versus the kind of astrology that is mainstream that we know today, the stuff that you see on Instagram, pop culture? Yeah, like what differentiates that from what we know in pop culture?
There's a couple of things in modern astrology. For example, classical astrology, you're working with the 7 visible planets. They were called the 7 wandering stars. So those were the planets that, before telescopes, in whatever 600 AD, when people were observing the movements of the stars and, pre-enlightenment, they were known as, like I said, the seven wandering stars. The techniques and the structure is far deeper and more rich than psychological or modern astrology in particular. Modern astrology really became popular. It's gone through phases. So, people, there are these phases of interest in like mysticism and the occult and spiritualism, in the 19th century with the rise of industrialism. There was also a co-movement of, let's go to the past, what's beyond, because out of the fear and anxiety of like the forward movement of the industrial complex, basically. Like, so to kind of sum it up, the particularly Hellenistic ancient astrology is rooted in classical philosophy, Plato in particular, and whereas modern astrology came about really in the turn of the 20th century, and had a number of sort of prominent and well-known astrologers that popularized it to the mainstream culture. That it's really the early century that when sun signs became, published in newspapers as forms of entertainment. And also the difference really is that there were other movements like theosophy, which was kind of a spiritualist movement happening in the 20th century that sort of got conflated with modern. So if you're looking at it just in a strict technical way, ancient astrology is really, utilizing it's utilizing the concept of fate and free will together. Whereas I feel like modern is also, because it came up in that time where, you had Freud and Jung and the rise of psychoanalysis, there was this sort of more closely linked, I think, to kind of an unconscious process that's within, rather than classical, which is more external, internal relationship, I think. My personal view on it. You can look at like these phases. So the popularization of, astrology in the 60s and the 70s, for example. And I think it's very similar to like what's happening now in terms of it's sort of being in vogue or being in fashion. So it kind of goes out there into the world and becomes, homogenized and, it's kind of fun and entertainment, but also it's much more complex, I feel, when you are looking at it through the lens of the classical antiquity, because you also have to understand the classical world. One other distinction, which I may have skipped over, which is that you're using the seven classical planets. And now most astrologers who are practicing ancient astrology, they also use the 3 extra ones that were discovered in the last century or so. So there's the 7 classical, there's the sun and the moon, those are the 2 luminaries. Then there's the other 5. The next one after the sun and the moon is Mercury. That's the one that can travel between the upper and the lower worlds. Then there's Venus and Mars. They're sort of considered the illicit lovers, the warrior and the lover. And then there's Jupiter and Saturn. And it's sort of like Jupiter's sort of the sage, the philosopher. Jupiter was Zeus, and Saturn was, Zeus's dad. So Saturn's like, old age and things like that. Then there's the 3 outer planets, which are Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, which were in modern astrology, as they were discovered, they were assigned to some Scorpio, Pisces, and Aquarius. There are reasons for that, why it was assigned to those particular signs, but they were said to be sort of, those 3 new planets were said to be the higher octaves of, for example, Venus, Mercury, and Mars. They were supposed to be sort of like related outer planets.
So it's only recently that those signs were assigned to
only
these
within
newer...
only within the last century. I don't know the exact dates of when they were discovered, but it hasn't been that long. So we haven't seen those cycles play out.
Interesting. So in Hellenistic astrology, then what were they assigned to, and do you still abide by what they were assigned to?
So you basically are using them as planetary influences, but you're not using them. The main difference is that you're not using them as rulers of signs. So they exist. So for example, instead of like, you might read Pisces is, the ruler's Neptune. That's the modern ruler.
Right.
And you'll see that distinction. That's the modern ruler. Jupiter's the ancient ruler. But if you're using the Hellenistic techniques or the ancient astrology techniques, you're not using the outer planets as rulers. You're using them sort of as separate stars or separate planets that have their own rules, their own influence, and they do have a purpose and they do influence the chart, but they're not influencing it in the same. The system of rulership is a very important concept in traditional astrology. You start with the planets, then you go down to the signs, then you go into the houses. That's sort of like, those are the 3, and then the final as part of that aspects, which is the relationships between the planets.
Okay. I just want to bring it back to when you say it's a little bit deeper, and you have more of a connection, which I just want you to elaborate a little bit more. Just because I always talk to you all the time about like my spirals, and I'm like, what's going on? So I just kind of want to kind of go over just like your sun, your moon, your rising, and your time of birth. How important are those things in your chart and to what's going on, and kind of what you say, quote unquote, just giving me a weather report, and how I can actually understand what's happening and choose to behave accordingly, because at the end of the day, we don't have any control, and it's kind of like letting go and just choosing how you're going to react.
Right.
So,
But even in saying that, even in saying we don't have control, but then we are going to choose our reaction, this is still an interplay of we can't control what happens to us. We can only control how we may act or react to the situation. So there is still a relationship. So the rising sign in traditional astrology was considered the most important sign because when you're looking at a horizon line, so you're looking at a horizon line, the sign, there's two motions. There's a motion of the zodiac, which is kind of moving this way through, like, imagine this is the horizon line as we're looking here. Everything above it is, the sky. Everything below is the earth, under the earth is not visible. When you're looking at a chart, it's a round circle and there's, like pie pieces all throughout. That horizon line on the eastern side of it is your rising sign, because what's happening is that the zodiac sign, the constellation that's rising up out of the earth into the sphere of life. So you are emerging out of your mother's body into life, is symbolically correlated to that sign that's rising up out of the earth. So it's like an omen.
okay.
So that's why the time is very important. In traditional astrology, it was not your sun sign and your moon sign. Those are important. Those are important planets. However, there are just a couple of distinctions to be made with that also. The rising sign was considered to be, because it's the first sign, it's you coming out, was said to be your physical body, your personality, of all of the areas of the chart, which there's 12 areas of life, that is the one that's considered to be the most you of all of them. So other things in the chart might be your marriage and partnerships, your children, your home and family, your parents, your job, your money, your themes around death or themes around sickness, physical illness, mental illness. All of those subject matters are different parts of your life. The rising sign is you, and the rest is like your life, if that clears it up. Okay.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So
And
that's
then-
why when you're reading horoscopes were primarily created as a sun sign horoscope, but the general public is not as much aware of like what is the purpose of the sun sign. The sun sign encompasses an entire month, because the constellation, the sun is traveling through that constellation for an entire month. And the sun is an important component of your chart. It's like your vitality, your life force. So if you are the rising sign, the sun sign is sort of the path that you're choosing to sort of carry out the needs of the self, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But can you elaborate on that a little bit? So like the path that you're choosing. So say, okay, I'm going to give myself as an example.
Yeah.
I'm a Taurus sun. So what does that mean in terms of me choosing how I choose to go about my path? Is like
What's
the
your rising?
characteristics is I'm Cancer.
So
but then Taurus.
Rising, so the Cancer rising, if the Cancer rising is you, your personality, your physical body, your appearance, like all of that is governed by the moon. So that's another thing that I will talk about, which is the kind of what I would consider to be the second part of the like one of the most important parts of that. Now that is something that's been debated on even in classical times between different astrologers and philosophers about, is there one planet that controls the destiny of life, or is it the entire chart? Or there's a lot of arguments around that. But if the rising sign is you, it's your Cancer rising. So the moon and themes around caring, nurturing, protection, the home, women, children, the vulnerable, those are all sort of moon influences. If those things are sort of your personality, your persona, your Taurus sun sign is like what's shining out into the world to carry that through. So you might carry it out by bringing all of those themes of like emotion and caretaking, nurturing into something material and physical and grounded. And
Interesting.
Venus and actualizing. Earth signs are always about materializing they're physical signs.
It's so interesting how layered. It's so layered.
So they're taking your these emotional qualities, the water qualities, into something physical. And Taurus being a Venus ruled sign, also, it's not just physical, but it's sort of about making or materializing something in a way that corresponds with Venus themes and characteristics.
Love.
So, yes, love, relationships, harmony, security in particular in Taurus. Venus rules two signs, Libra and Taurus. And in Taurus, it's a fixed sign. So that means it likes to hold steady. It's a very securing, building type of energy. And then the final part of that would be like, where's that doing it that in your life? Is it doing it in the area of your children? Is it doing it in the area of your work, in your relationships? So that's just breaking down a rising and a sun, for example. There is a second part of that, which is that that there's a concept that was lost also, which is about having a night chart versus a day chart. So if you have a day chart, that means that horizon line, that sun is above the horizon. It's above your rising sign. If your sun's below it, you're a night chart. What does that mean? It means that the moon,
I'm a night chart.
Moon sign may take prominence.
I think I'm a night chart too.
Are you?
I think
you are. I know, Jamie, you are. I know for sure.
Because you definitely help. I know about you helping Jamie quite a bit.
All the time.
Yeah.
So
Mars like, yep.
Which is so cool.
No, because what's funny is that when I'm looking at people's charts often, I also remember, especially if I have a relationship with that person, like a friendship or something, I will sometimes be doing random things, and I will, like, that person's chart will show up in my mind. It's a very strange thing. Like, I'll be thinking about something, and I will literally see the chart visually, and then I will see like a planet and see the planet in the chart, and like make an association and be like, I have to tell that person, or I have to, like, it's weird.
That's great. I mean, that's so cool.
I don't know why. I'm not like that in any other, well, a little bit.
Well, then you're doing the right thing.
I know.
Seems.
Yeah.
So what is the difference between a night chart and a day chart then?
The idea comes from those, like I said, there's the two luminaries. So there's the day, which is more like if you think about the sun is masculine to some degree, in the sense that it just exists. If we don't have the sun, we can't live. It's life itself. The moon is light that is reflected. So the moon is more receptive. It's more, sometimes interior. And the moon, so the idea is that the sun has its own like team of planets that will help or hurt it, because there's this whole concept of like I said, like being above or below the earth. And like when some signs, like Mars, for example, when Mars is up above the earth, Mars is a hot and dry sign. That comes from a whole other concept, which you may know about medieval astrology or Renaissance astrology, which is around Socratic, like being like choleric, or
and then they just bleed you. It's like the cure is
comes from is that you have a severe melancholic constitution. That's correlated to astrology.
And then someone who's like more yellow. I remember learning about this, the Renaissance
stuff.
It's
more about being hot and dry. So this is Vedic also. It's about being like wet, hot, cool, warm.
Vedic as in like Vata, Pitta.
Yes.
And the third, I don't remember. Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's very similar, because, Hellenistic astrology, was historically moving all around, it's supposedly originated in Egypt and Babylon and King Alexandria, when there were all these like intellectuals and different mixings of cultures. Persian astrology was also very, highly, in prominence, it'd be I think it came after Hellenistic, or but anyway, it made its way over to India. So India has its own. Vedic astrology is a whole other world where they have their own cultural and philosophical like foundations for that, but there are some similarities in the sense of like that the temperaments of the planets, for example. So just to go back to like the day and the night, so a day chart, there's certain planets that like they like to be around each other. So this, if you are a day chart, your best planet is Jupiter and your worst planet is Mars, because Mars doesn't like to be up in the daylight because it's hot. So it's like it gets inflamed and it's like flares up and it's violent and it's severing and it's very like, you know, aggressive.
Bad attitude.
You bad, yeah, real bad, real bad. And then the night chart is usually the best planet. Your best planet is Venus and your worst planet is Saturn. And the reason for that is because Saturn is cold and dry and isolated and far away. So when it's in a cool, dark place, it's even worse.
That's where I'm at right now.
So you would
right?
want it to, you know what I mean? Like you would want your Saturn, if you're a night chart, you'd want your Saturn to be up in the day because it would temper it a little bit. But if it's also underneath there's a whole analysis that comes in for many different factors with planets, like where they are, who they're relating to, who they're ruled by, etc. It's called, you know, you're analyzing the dignity of a planet basically. And that's kind of like, what's the health of the planet? Is it healthy? Can it do what it needs to do? Does it have trouble? Who's hanging out with it? Who's helping it? Who's hurting it?
I feel like lately mine are not good. Like they're not healthy lately.
Well, I think is that part of like the, you know, I guess Hellenistic astrology is your journey. So there will be planets that have opposing rulers, and in the placement of your chart, it's going to cause different struggles that you have to overcome in this lifetime, kind of thing.
Yes.
You know,
yes. There's sort of like, there's weak points and good points. And that's another that's in ancient astrology that was kind of taken out of modern astrology because they were like, you know, this is too, that was medieval times and, you know, classical Greece, like we're not living in antiquity anymore. Like we don't need to have good and bad planets. Like we're going to remove that. But actually they have a strong function because they really tell you about, you know, the fact that there is good and evil in the world. So there's malefic planets, that's Mars and Saturn, and there's benefic planets, that's Venus and Jupiter. You know, Venus being love, harmony, women, like I said, beauty, Jupiter being, you know, wealth, benevolence, like all of these like sort of like great. So that's Jupiter was like the greater benefic and Venus is the lesser benefic. And then in the malefics, Mars is the lesser and Saturn is the greater malefic. So we just went through a 2-year period from 2020 and until just recently of Saturn being in its own sign in Capricorn, but also meeting up with Pluto. And that's what sort of was the cause, not the cause, but the correlation between the events of the pandemic and astrologically speaking would be the Saturn dominant forces, if you will, that we all endured, which have to do with imprisonment, isolation, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's something you could have seen. You saw it's clear.
I'm telling you, I remember sitting at a month before it happened, I was sitting at work and and I was like, do you guys really, everyone was like, what's going to happen in 2020? And I was like, I don't think you want to know, guys. It's not great.
Something is going to happen.
And I remember reading it out and being like, you know, the last time this conjunction happened was during the plague and, you know.
The Great Conjunction.
Yeah, that's actually the Great Conjunction that people talked about recently was the Aquarius one. So Saturn moved from earthy, feminine material, like actual literal lockdown, to air lockdown. So we're still in Saturn times in the sense that Saturn is still in its home. It just moved from the night home to the day home.
How, like, if you could tell us where we're at in terms of getting out of this whole global situation.
We're emerging out, but we are emerging into a new world, into a new air. A lot of astrologers will tell you that it's an air century, you know, an air, like the next few hundred years. We've been in an earthy time, and we with the Aquarian conjunction, and it's nothing to do with Age of Aquarius, PS. That's something else. That's another concept entirely, which I can't get into here, but it has to do with basically moving into this age of air. So Jupiter was in Aquarius and Saturn was in Aquarius in 2021. We've now moved Jupiter into its home of Pisces just in December. And that is a very positive, it's like a relief. It's like we can all breathe because Jupiter is like in Pisces and water is very imaginative and visionary and artistic and healing and spiritual and all those things. I actually have natally, not only do I have Jupiter in Pisces myself natally, but it's also my chart ruler.
Mhm.
So it's something that's actually, and it's like the best, it's in a very good healthy place for itself. So that's lifting, I think, a lot of the struggles that everyone has been going through. And also I think there's something about Jupiter and Pisces that's very connected to grief, because it is a water sign, and because it is, Pisces is the sign that is, having to do with light. So it's coming out of the winter time and it's moving into the spring, but it's still in the winter time. So it's been in the winter time, and there's a duality with all mutable signs where it's the two fishes, right? The two fishes are, so one is moving this way, the other moving that way. So one is moving towards the darkness, and wants, has, and one is trying to emerge out of it. So there's this kind of tension and this yearning that comes with Pisces. That's there is a kind of sadness or emotional, like, sort of like you're coming into the light where you've really been in the dark. Which I think is kind of beautiful. So I think that that's where we are now, where there's this sort of hopefulness. There's a hope, and there's a kind of there's an emotional renewal that, like, it's going to get better. It's going
Springtime.
We're seeing if we're still in it, even if
we need some of that.
Yeah. And then,
nice
it's going to, other planets are going to move off into, we're going to have Jupiter is going to move into Aries in the summertime, and that's like very fiery. So I think that's going to be kind of a cool
hell yeah
transit. Yeah.
Okay, do you want to talk to us a little bit about your tarot? Because
Sure.
because you do mine quite often. You did Rebs.
You have done mine.
Yeah.
I've done parties. I've done work situation. I've done everything.
And I will say, every time we do it, with me personally speaking, it's always like spot on, and it's pretty fucking insane. But yes, how does the tarot and the astrology link up, and how do you, like, that's a form of your own practice, correct?
Yeah, so they're both, well, a lot of people who practice tarot also practice some astrology and vice versa, but they also tend to be somewhat different worlds to some degree. I feel like tarot, they're both divinatory arts, like I Ching, like I don't know, reading tea leaves, or any whatever divining tool you might use. But in particular for me, the way I experience reading tarot and communicating it is that it definitely is more fluid. Astrology for me is very structured and very, even if it is a bit, it is an interpretive art, there is a very strong, for me, there's more of a strong philosophy and structure, and less wiggle room, if you will, in terms of how you're reading charts. And I also tend to be more technical, I think, with charts than I am with tarot. Tarot for me is it's more fluid, it's more psychological, in the sense that you're also using images. So and there's a three-way thing that happens, which is that I'm pulling cards, I'm interpreting the cards in a certain fashion, and then the person is receiving that. So there's like three parts to it. And also the way I experience tarot personally is very much the same way as I would experience like drawing and painting. It is not within my control. I am simply communicating like what I think I'm just literally interpreting something for someone. But it's I do experience it as if something's coming, like you're
channeling.
Channeling. You're getting something from me that's not in my control. So when I'm doing readings also, like I have a practice of like kind of I try to clear myself out. I try to like keep everything pure, like that, making sure that whatever it is that we're going to experience together is going to be, as everybody always says, like for the highest good and for the, the best purposes, like whatever the messages are, because sometimes the tarot it can really touch on some difficult things. Really sensitive stuff. I mean, astrology also, all of it, and especially interpreting personally, when you're working with people, I really try to communicate as much as I can with, as much like humility and grace and love as possible, because I think that it's also your life and your world, and you can really hurt somebody if you are not respectful and careful with the information and the relationship that you have.
For sure. Yeah.
Going off on a tangent, but yeah, I've been reading tarot since I was a teenager with my sister. We used to read it together, and then kind of the same time when I got more into astrology, taking it more seriously, I started reading for other people. I was really doing it as a personal practice, and then I started reading for other people, and it was something that I felt I needed less in my life as a personal tool, and that other people needed more from me. So that's how it kind of came in. I mean, tarot is also, it has rules, it has, a language, it has symbolism, but they are also related to astrology. Like there's 4 elements, there's a range of, it's a story, it's sort of like a set of playing cards. And then you have a fool's journey, which is the major arcana, which is 0 to 22. So you have kind of like a big picture fool's journey story, like the hero's journey, if you will, and like archetypal archetypal myths. And then you have those suits of sort of like the players of your life, or the events of your life. So I think it's a really interesting tool to, again, take something and to inner and bringing it out. I think that's really also why I use it, because I want to help the people that I'm working with to sort of mirror what they're feeling in a way.
For sure.
Right.
Be able to get it. I feel like once you're able to get it out, you can kind of deal with it. That makes it more of like transformative process.
Yeah. Well, thank you for explaining
Sure.
the kind of like the relationship between those two, and like how you practice it, and how they do kind of, I feel like, mirror each other.
I do have a question actually regarding it.
Go ahead.
This is something I'm always curious about. We'll just wrap up with this. And
yeah.
So in terms of tarot, when you do have cards pulled, first of all, what is sending the message through you? Like, what is dictating? What is the energy that is dictating the message that needs to be sent? And secondly, do you think it's possible that sometimes when a card is pulled, it then makes you see what you think is reflecting the card? Because I know that when I was doing a lot of tarot, I was like, wait, is that what that was meaning? But then it's like, am I creating?
Yeah.
What's that word for that?
That's a good question. And it's a similar question. I'm going to come back to it, but it's a similar question as to, for example, astrology. There's a famous quote that the stars do not, impel, that they compel, they don't impel, meaning it's a snapshot or a mirror rather than a creation of. So there's that tension, but I think it's the same thing, is that, and I think anybody who's practicing and skepticism and criticism around these kinds of things, which I definitely am a very skeptical person. I am somebody who is constantly like, is this true? Is this real? I'm not sure, like I really skeptical about a lot of things, but I will say that, yes, there's always going to be a degree of projection. Just like if you see a therapist, there's going to be a relationship there of you projecting your stuff and them projecting theirs, and that kind of thing. I think that definitely happens. I don't know how you could get around that, but I will also say that there is something to all of these arts that is uncanny, unexplainable, strange.
Yes, for sure.
Because I experience it myself when people say like, oh, you said XYZ. And I'm like, I don't even remember saying that. Sometimes I do remember. I'll be like, oh, I remember I pulled this card. But most of the time, it is the same as when I'm drawing or painting. It's like an out-of-body experience, your altered state of consciousness. I'm there with you reading, but it's something else coming through.
It's like a medium.
That's all I could say.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's like a medium.
Yeah. Like you're just
it's like we have to accept the unexpected.
Yeah, and it's sort of like and for me, it's like I'm just reading the cards. I don't consider myself a medium in the sense that I'm transmitting messages. Like when I've seen mediums, for sure, it's a totally different thing. And I've had experiences where people come to me and they think I'm a medium, and I'm like, I'm not like a visionary, like I'm going to look at. I mean, some people can do that. It's they
Yeah.
really have that ability, and I think that ability exists, like a preconception, but I think precognitive, basically.
Yeah.
You see something before it's going to happen. I do have that sense and that feeling about things. I think actually everybody has it.
Yeah.
But
Animal instinct too.
yeah, it's an instinct, and I think it's also like a dream. It's sort
For
of like,
sure.
but yeah, I think I don't know where I was going with that. Just something that there is something that happens that is beyond cognition, beyond explaining, and that's the part I think that keeps me engaged in doing it with people, because what I was going to say is that I've had people come to me and be like, why don't you, what is my boyfriend doing right now? And I'm like, I don't know.
Flying.
Hard, you can't. And they're like, that's also something I don't do, is like, I won't look into somebody else's life using cards, or and I actually won't look at somebody else's chart without their consent, because I just feel like it's not
Ethical.
moral.
Yeah.
I do have around some things, and ethics, codes of ethics around for my practice. Yeah.
Great.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Mara. I think on
Thank
that
you.
note, we can wrap up. And please, for our audience, share with us your socials. So if you want to book a reading with Mara, you can. And we'll also list it in the comments or description. It'll all be there. But yeah, please.
Yeah. Perfect. Great. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. It was really good to talk about it.
Thanks so much for doing this.
Okay.
Okay,
We
I will talk to you
appreciate
later.
you.
Bye.
Bye.